Stop chasing, not because you are cold, not because you do not care, not because love is fake and everybody is selfish. Stop chasing because the version of love you've been living inside has turned you into a beggar for things that should have been given freely. Some of you have spent years trying to be so understanding, so patient, so available, so emotionally mature that you became easy to drain. You called it loyalty. You called it depth. You called it seeing the best in people. But deep down, your spirit has been tired for a long time. Tired of carrying conversations. Tired of over-explaining your heart. Tired of being the one who always reaches first, forgives first, and waits the longest. And here is the painful truth. When your soul has not learned how to recognize alignment, it will call familiar pain chemistry. It will call inconsistency passion. It will call emotional unavailability mystery. It will call being needed love. So this is not just about who you date, who you befriend, or who texts you back. This is about the filter inside you. The filter that keeps mistaking hunger for connection. The filter that keeps confusing your assignment to heal with your permission to be used. Because the right people do not have to be chased down like fugitives. The right people do not make you audition for basic care. The right people do not leave you speaking a language of devotion while they answer in fragments. There is a way to become so rooted in who you truly are that what is wrong for you can no longer hold your attention for long. There is a way to stop pouring yourself into dead soil. There is a way to become a magnet instead of a martyr. And today we are going to break the cycle. Not by making you harder, by making you truer. Not by teaching you how to manipulate attention, by teaching you how to recognize what your soul should never have to chase. Because once your energy becomes honest, your relationships have no choice but to become honest too. And that is when the right people start finding you. There is a pattern that destroys more relationships than people realize. It is the pattern of the fixer, the one who always sees a wound before they see a warning, the one who confuses emotional labor with intimacy, the one who walks into a connection and immediately starts sensing what this person could become if they were just loved the right way. Maybe that is you. Maybe you do not enter relationships asking, do they have the capacity to meet me? Maybe you enter relationships asking, how can I help them finally become who they were meant to be? And on the surface, that can look noble. It can look compassionate. It can even look spiritual. But let me ask you something. Do you view relationships as rescue missions? Not in theory, in practice. When someone is inconsistent, do you feel more activated, not less? When someone is emotionally closed, do you feel invited to prove your safety? When someone gives you almost nothing, do you start offering even more because some part of you believes your love can be the breakthrough they have never had? That is not always love. Sometimes that is programming. Because a lot of people who call themselves the strong one were trained to become strong too early. You became the calm one because chaos was normal. You became the understanding one because your own needs were inconvenient. You became the giver because somewhere in your story love was tied to usefulness. And now, without even realizing it, you feel most valuable when you were overextending. So you keep choosing people who need everything and offer very little. You keep stepping into lopsided bonds where your role is to regulate, reassure, absorb, and endure. You keep telling yourself they are going through a lot. You keep giving grace far beyond where truth should have stepped in. And before long, you are not in a relationship. You are in a survival system. Hear this clearly. Being the strong one all the time is not always a sign of maturity. Sometimes it is a trauma response wearing a halo, because real strength is not your ability to carry broken dynamics indefinitely. Real strength is your ability to recognize when a connection is feeding on your life force and walk away before your spirit goes numb. And there are signs, always signs. The first sign of a parasitic bond is that your energy drops every time you interact, but your attachment keeps increasing. That is a dangerous combination. You leave every conversation feeling drained, confused, undernourished, maybe even a little ashamed, and yet you keep craving their validation even more. That is not peace. That is depletion mixed with dependency. The second sign is that the relationship survives on your effort. If you stop initiating, it fades. If you stop understanding, it fractures. If you stop making excuses, the truth becomes obvious. You are the oxygen tank of the entire connection, and somewhere deep inside, you know it. The third sign is that you are attached more to their potential than their reality. You keep saying things like, they could be amazing if they healed. They would be so loving if they felt safe. This could be beautiful if they just opened up. But you are not dating the future. You are living in the now. And the now is where your nervous system is either nourished or neglected. That is the recap your spirit may have needed for a long time. If your bond drains you, depends on your overfunctioning, and survives on fantasy more than fact, you are not in sacred connection. You are in a parasitic loop, and some of you know this already. You have known it for months, maybe years, but because you have such a deep heart, you keep giving the relationship one more chance, one more conversation, one more explanation, one more act of mercy. You keep hoping your consistency will inspire theirs. You keep hoping your softness will finally make them safe enough to show up. You keep hoping that if you love purely enough, the imbalance will correct itself. But relationships are not transformed by one person bleeding harder. At some point, you have to stop asking, how do I get them to rise? And start asking, why am I available for dynamics that require me to disappear? That question changes everything, because the issue is not only that the wrong people keep showing up. The deeper issue is that some part of your energy still mistakes familiar misalignment for meaningful connection. And that leads us into the next truth. A lot of relationships fail before they even begin because of frequency mismatch. Not because one person is evil. Not because one person is unworthy. Because they are simply not speaking the same energetic language. Think of it like radio stations. You can have a beautiful song playing on one station and static on another. The problem is not that music does not exist. The problem is that you are trying to hear harmony on the wrong frequency. That is what so many people do in relationships. You are tuned to truth, depth, consistency, vulnerability, growth, and you keep trying to build a bond with someone tuned to avoidance, ambiguity, half-presence, performance, and emotional scarcity. Then you wonder why it feels hard, why you feel unseen, why every conversation leaves a residue, why you have to keep translating your heart into smaller and smaller pieces just so they can handle it. Let me ask you this. Who in your life has made you feel like you are too much, too deep, too emotional, too intentional, too affectionate, too aware, too honest about what you need? Who taught you that your fullness needed editing before it could be loved? Because that belief has trapped many beautiful souls in counterfeit connections. They start shrinking to stay connected. They lower their standards and call it patience. They silence their intuition and call it being open-minded. They tolerate emotional crumbs and call it not asking for too much. But if you have to shrink to remain in a relationship, that is not alignment. That is self-abandonment. The right connection does not require you to become less vivid, less honest, less alive. The right connection makes your soul exhale. The right connection can hold your tenderness without mocking it, your depth without fearing it, your standards without punishing you for having them. Now listen carefully, because this part is important. Alignment is not sameness. It does not mean you both have the same personality, the same life story, or the same style. It means your values can recognize each other. It means your nervous systems do not turn love into a battlefield. It means your hearts are moving in the same direction, even if your steps are different. A person can be attractive and still be a mismatch. A person can be kind in moments and still be unsafe for your soul. A person can say they care and still not have the capacity to care in a way that nourishes you. That does not make them bad. It just means they are not your place of rest. And one of the hardest things to accept is that chemistry is not confirmation. You can feel pulled toward someone and still be pulled by a wound. You can feel obsessed with someone and still be activated by inconsistency. You can feel fireworks and still be standing in front of danger wearing perfume. Not every strong feeling is a green light. Some feelings are alarms dressed up as attraction. That is why discernment matters more than intensity. Because intensity can make a person feel unforgettable. But discernment asks a better question. Do they bring clarity? Do they bring steadiness? Do they bring truth? Do they leave me more anchored in myself or more fragmented than I was before they arrived? The wrong frequency will always require labor. You will have to explain why communication matters. Explain why honesty matters. Explain why reciprocity matters. Explain why disappearing for days and returning with charm is not emotional depth. Explain why your heart is not unreasonable for wanting consistency. And the more you explain, the more exhausted you become, because your soul knows what your mouth is still trying to negotiate. This does not fit. And sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is stop trying to force resonance where there is only noise. Stop calling it bad timing. Stop romanticizing confusion. Stop giving sacred access to people who can only meet you in fragments. Because the truth is, when someone is aligned with you, there is far less translation. There is space. There is coherence. There is honesty without dragging it out of them. There is care that does not have to be reverse engineered. You are not asking for fantasy. You are asking for fit, and fit matters. Because love is not proven by how much misalignment you can survive. Love is revealed by how much truth two people can hold without one person having to betray themselves. So before you ask who is coming into your life next, ask what frequency you are still tolerating now. Ask yourself why chaos feels magnetic. Ask yourself why calm feels unfamiliar. Ask yourself why being fully received can feel almost suspicious after years of having to earn every scrap of affection. These questions matter because the people you attract are not only responding to what you desire, they are responding to what you make room for. And if your room is still crowded with confusion, mixed signals, and emotional debt, alignment will feel foreign even when it finally arrives. That is why the next step is not just finding better people, it is clearing the signal. It is letting the wrong energy leave. It is making peace with the space that comes after misalignment ends. Because many people say they want the right connection. But when the wrong one begins to fade, they panic at the silence. And in that silence, your real healing begins. The purge is where most people turn back. Not because they do not want love, because they do. But they do not yet know how to live without the familiar noise of almost love. So when the wrong connection starts slipping out of their life, they feel withdrawal. They mistake that withdrawal for proof that they should hold on. They mistake the ache of detachment for destiny. But sometimes your pain is not saying, go back. Sometimes your pain is saying, something unhealthy had access to your system for too long, and now your body is learning how to function without it. That is what the purge really is. It is not punishment. It is not bitterness. It is not becoming cold. It is the sacred process of removing everything that trained you to accept less than what your soul was built for. And yes, it can feel brutal at first, because when you stop entertaining half-hearted connections, your phone gets quieter. When you stop chasing people who only respond to pursuit, your world can feel strangely still. When you stop giving energy to what never deserved that level of access, you will come face to face with space. And some of you are not afraid of toxic people. You are afraid of empty space. You are afraid of the silence after the distraction. Afraid of the evenings that are no longer filled with overthinking them. Afraid of not having a romantic project to manage. Afraid of what you will feel when there is no one left to rescue. So let me ask you plainly, are you afraid of the empty space? Because that question reveals more than most people want to admit. A lot of people say they miss the person. What they really miss is the occupation, the stimulation, the emotional storyline, the familiar place where their energy could go instead of returning to themselves. But the empty space is not your enemy. The empty space is where your standards become real. It is where your nervous system comes down from the addiction to inconsistency. It is where your soul begins remembering what peace actually feels like. And before that peace becomes sweet, it can feel unbearable. You may want to text them just to break the silence. You may want to check their page just to feel a pulse. You may want to reopen doors that heaven already helped close. Do not confuse the discomfort of detox with the loss of something sacred. Some things hurt to release because you wrapped your identity around enduring them. And there is another truth here that many people need to hear. Letting go of the bare minimum is not a tragedy. It is a correction. If someone only gives you crumbs, losing them is not losing a feast. If someone only appears when it is convenient, their absence is not abandonment. If someone only knows how to reach for you when they are lonely, bored, or in need of validation, you are not losing love when they fade. You are losing interruption. That is the recap your heart may need. The purge is not about giving up on connection. It is about giving up on counterfeit connection. It is about finally recognizing that half presence is not a blessing. It is a blockage, and not every ending is dramatic. Sometimes the purge looks like the quiet fade out. No screaming match, no final betrayal, No grand announcement, just a slow, honest withdrawal of your energy. You stop forcing conversation. You stop explaining things they refuse to understand. You stop making room for behavior that once kept you emotionally homeless. And because you are no longer feeding the dynamic, it quietly collapses under the weight of its own emptiness. That kind of ending can feel strange because there is no cinematic closure, no perfect final speech, no moment where they suddenly understand your worth and apologize with tears in their eyes. Sometimes closure is simply this: I see clearly now, and I will not continue. That is enough. That is wholly enough. You do not need everyone to agree with your departure for your departure to be right. And once the purge begins, another challenge appears. You have to build a self that does not rush to refill the vacancy with another distraction. You have to become the kind of person who can sit with peace long enough for peace to stop feeling empty. That is where real magnetism begins. Not when you learn how to look more desirable. Not when you master a dating strategy. Not when you become more mysterious or less available in some performative way. Real magnetism begins when your energy stops asking strangers to confirm what only inner anchoring can establish, because you do not attract what you say you want. You attract what your being is practiced in tolerating. That is the twist many people resist. You can say you want honesty, but if you are familiar with deception, honesty may feel foreign when it arrives. You can say you want consistency, but if your nervous system is trained on unpredictability, consistency may initially feel bland. You can say you want healthy love, but if you have spent years equating struggle with value, health may feel almost suspicious. So the magnet is not built by wishing for better people. It is built by becoming unavailable for the patterns that distort your discernment. And that begins with self-anchoring. There are 3 pillars here, and if you build them well, your relational life changes from the inside out. The first pillar is self-respect, not the loud kind, not ego, not performance. I mean the quiet, rooted decision that your heart will no longer be treated like a public resource. Self-respect changes what you entertain. It changes how long you wait for clarity that should already be obvious. It changes how quickly you notice when someone is consuming access without offering presence. It changes your relationship with the word no. Because people who lack self-respect often confuse boundaries with rejection. They feel guilty for protecting their peace. They feel harsh for honoring their own limits. They feel selfish for refusing dynamics that drain them. But boundaries are not cruelty. Boundaries are the architecture of self-honor. The second pillar is self-trust. This one is deep, because many people do not stay in wrong relationships because they cannot see the red flags. They stay because they do not trust what they see. Their intuition whispers early, this is off. This person is not available. This dynamic is costing you too much. But then the mind comes in and starts bargaining. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I need to be more patient. Maybe this is just my fear talking. Maybe love requires more struggle than I thought, and slowly they talk themselves out of the truth. Their spirit already knew. Self-trust means you stop abandoning your own discernment just because someone is charming, attractive, wounded, spiritual sounding, or temporarily attentive. Self-trust means you honor the signals. You stop demanding courtroom-level proof before you let yourself leave what is clearly misaligned. You stop waiting until the damage is undeniable, because a red flag does not become more valid just because it repeats 10 times. It was valid the first time your peace got disturbed. The third pillar is self-nourishment. This is where many people have work to do, because when your life is emotionally underfed, you will be tempted by almost anyone who offers intensity. When you are disconnected from joy, intimacy with yourself, purpose, beauty, friendship, and rest, you become vulnerable to counterfeit closeness, not because you are weak, because you are hungry. And hungry people often call any available energy a meal. So learn how to feed your own soul. Create a life that is not standing still, waiting to be chosen. Create rituals that remind you that your existence is already worthy of tenderness. Take yourself out. Keep promises to yourself. Make your home feel like safety. Build mornings that return you to your body. Build evenings that do not depend on someone else's attention to feel meaningful. Date yourself first. Not in a shallow slogan way, in a real way. Learn what kind of environments soften you. Learn what conversations make you feel alive. Learn what pace brings you back to center. Learn how to enjoy your own company so deeply that loneliness stops being able to blackmail you into bad decisions. Because a person who can enjoy their own life radiates differently. They do not cling the same way. They do not negotiate their worth so quickly. They do not mistake attention for alignment. They do not panic every time something ends. They become magnetic because they are no longer pulling from famine. And let me say this carefully. Magnetism is not about becoming flawless. It is about becoming congruent. When your values, your boundaries, your actions, and your energy begin telling the same truth, the people who thrive on confusion will feel less comfortable around you. They will call you distant because you are no longer easily hooked. They will call you intense because you ask direct questions. They will call you changed because your access is no longer cheap. Let them. You are not here to stay digestible for those who benefited from your lack of clarity. You are here to become so internally coherent that what is false can no longer sit with you for long. And yes, there will be moments where this new version of you feels almost unfamiliar to yourself. You will notice that you are less eager to impress, less willing to chase, less available for emotional scavenger hunts, less enchanted by words that are not backed by presence. That is not you becoming detached from love. That is you becoming detached from distortion. This is what it means to cultivate the magnet. You stop performing for acceptance. You stop overgiving for relevance. You stop shape-shifting to maintain interest. And from that place, something beautiful starts to happen. Your attraction shifts. You begin noticing things you used to overlook. A person's steadiness starts feeling attractive. Emotional clarity starts feeling attractive. Integrity starts feeling attractive. You start valuing ease, follow-through, and emotional cleanliness over drama, mystery, and intensity. You begin to realize that what you once called chemistry was often dysregulation in beautiful packaging. And as your energy settles, you become more capable of recognizing what is actually authentic. That matters because many people have spent so long around inconsistency that they no longer know what a green flag feels like in the body. They know excitement. They know obsession. They know the spike of anticipation before text finally arrives. They know the emotional roller coaster of being wanted one day and forgotten the next. But they do not know the feeling of being safely chosen. They do not know the feeling of being met without having to perform. They do not know the feeling of peace that does not need to be earned. So in the next part, we are going to talk about how to recognize the real thing when it appears. Because authentic connection does not just look different, it feels different. And if you have been trained by chaos, that feeling may surprise you more than anything. What does a green flag actually feel like? Not what does it look like on paper. Not what does it sound like in a perfectly worded text. What does it feel like in your body, in your spirit, in the quiet place where your discernment lives? Because that is where many people get confused. They know how to identify red flags after the damage is done. They know how to replay conversations and point out what was manipulative, what was vague, what was avoidant, what was selfish. But green flags are harder for wounded hearts to recognize because healthy love often arrives without the same adrenaline. It does not always crash into your life like a storm. Sometimes it enters like light, steady, warm, clear, uncomplicated in the ways that matter. An authentic person does not leave you spinning. They do not make you decode everything. They do not give you 12 mixed messages and then call your confusion insecurity. They do not create emotional weather patterns you have to keep adapting to. They are not perfect, but they are coherent. Their words and their behavior know each other. Their care is not only verbal. Their presence is not occasional theater. They show up in ways that your nervous system can actually trust. And at first, that can feel almost unfamiliar because peace feels boring when you are used to chaos. That is the twist. When your heart has been conditioned by inconsistency, healthy love can seem too quiet, too simple, too available. You may catch yourself wondering, why am I not more obsessed? Why does this not feel like the usual fire? Why is there no ache, no panic, no guessing game? Because maybe, for once, you are not being activated. Maybe, for once, you are being cared for. And there is a difference between intensity and intimacy. Intensity floods the system. Intimacy steadies it. Intensity makes you hyper-focused. Intimacy makes you feel safe enough to stay present. Intensity often feeds on uncertainty. Intimacy grows through clarity. So do not reject what is healthy just because it does not trigger the familiar emotional spikes you once called chemistry. Learn the signs of a covenant connection. It feels safe to be honest. You do not have to rehearse your truth before you speak it. You do not have to calculate whether your needs will be punished, dismissed, mocked, or minimized. You can be direct without fearing abandonment. It feels reciprocal, not scorekeeping, not perfect symmetry every second. But there is a visible mutuality. You are not carrying the whole bond on your back. They initiate, they remember, they consider, they repair. They contribute to the emotional atmosphere instead of only consuming it. It feels peaceful but not empty. There is warmth there, interest there, life there, but it is not constantly pulling you into survival mode. You do not feel addicted to contact because the connection itself is not starving you between moments of attention. It feels clarifying. Even when hard conversations happen, you leave with more understanding, not less. You do not walk away from every interaction doubting your memory, your standards, your tone, your worth. Truth may challenge you, but it does not distort you. And it feels like room to breathe, room to remain yourself, room to have a full emotional range without becoming a burden for existing. That is what authenticity does. It makes space for reality, not fantasy, not performance, reality. And let me say something to the person listening who keeps waiting for the other shoe to drop every time someone kind enters your life. That fear is understandable, but not everyone is a disguised lesson. Not everyone is a mirror of your old wounds. Not everyone will require excavation to access basic decency. Some people are exactly what they appear to be, grounded, clear, emotionally available, not because they are magical, because they have done their work. And when you meet someone like that, do not sabotage peace just because chaos once felt more believable. You do not need to manufacture tension to make a connection feel real. You do not need to withhold softness to prove you have standards. You do not need to stay guarded forever to avoid ever being hurt again. Discernment is not the same thing as emotional imprisonment. You can be wise and open. You can be careful and tender. You can have boundaries and still let yourself receive what is good. But receiving what is good requires patience. And that is where so many people break. Because after the purge, after the self-anchoring, after the clarity, there is often a stretch of time where the right connection still has not appeared. This is the patience protocol, and I know that part is difficult. Because once you finally stop entertaining the wrong people, you expect immediate reward. You think, I did the work, I let go, I raised the standard. So where is the aligned person? But soul-level connection is not usually delivered on the timeline of your loneliness. It arrives on the timeline of your readiness, your clarity, and sometimes your protection. There are delays that are not denials. There are pauses that are preserving you. There are seasons where nothing seems to be happening, while in reality, everything false is losing its power over your appetite. Trusting the delay is part of the work. Think about how many people you once begged heaven for who now make perfect sense as a no. At the time, you thought the wait was cruelty. Now you see, it was mercy. At the time, you thought the silence meant you were forgotten. Now you understand you were being kept from something that would have cost you more than you knew. So when the right connection has not yet arrived, do not rush to fill the gap with the substitute. Do not drag old patterns into a new season just because you are tired of waiting. Do not call loneliness a green light. Ask yourself this with full honesty. Will you settle out of loneliness? Will you give someone access just because the nights feel long? Will you entertain half-love because your standards suddenly seem expensive in an empty room? Will you reopen doors your spirit already outgrew just to avoid sitting with the ache of not yet? That is the question. Because many people do not lose themselves in love. They lose themselves in the fear that love may take longer than expected. And that fear makes them impulsive. It makes them compromise with things they had already outgrown. It makes them romanticize the almost. It makes them tell themselves that something is better than nothing, but something is not always better than nothing. Sometimes something drains your hope, confuses your spirit, fragments your energy, and trains you to distrust your own standards. In those moments, nothing is holier. Nothing can be a reset. Nothing can be space. Nothing can be sacred preparation. Do not despise the season that teaches you not to panic in your own company. Because the person who can wait without collapsing is the person who is no longer available for imitation love. And when the right one comes, you will notice another beautiful truth. The right one will not require a translation manual. You will not have to convert your needs into metaphors so they do not get scared. You will not have to shrink your intensity into bite-sized pieces so they can stay. You will not have to keep explaining why consistency matters, why honesty matters, why effort matters, why disappearing hurts, why reciprocity is not control, why clarity is not pressure. You will not have to teach them how to treat your heart like something alive, because aligned people may still be imperfect, but they are reachable, they are responsive, they are sincere. There is shared language there, not because every conversation is effortless, because the foundation is mutual willingness. That is what makes the right connection feel different. You are not dragging it uphill alone. So here is the activation. I want you to release the role of chaser, release the role of fixer, release the role of translator, rescuer, overgiver, emotional first responder, and constant pursuer of people who only know how to love in fractions. You do not have to earn alignment through exhaustion. You do not have to prove your worth by how long you can survive emotional drought. You do not have to audition for a place in the life of someone who keeps handing you confusion instead of care. You do not have to turn yourself into a rehabilitation center to deserve connection. Come back to your own center. Come back to the version of you that does not beg to be felt. Come back to the version of you that honors the first whisper of misalignment instead of waiting for collapse. Come back to the version of you that can recognize that attention is not devotion, chemistry is not covenant, and longing is not always love. Choose what chooses you clearly. Choose what can meet you consistently. Choose what leaves your soul stronger, calmer, cleaner, and more honest with itself. And until that arrives, do not call your waiting wasted. You are not behind. You are being refined. You are learning how to stop feeding what feeds on you. You are learning how to stop confusing hunger with destiny. You are learning how to become so deeply anchored in truth that only what is true can stay. That is authentic magnetism. It is not seduction. It is not performance. It is not becoming prettier, colder, louder, or harder to get. It is becoming so real that what is false cannot grip you for long. So let this be the day you stop chasing. Let this be the day you bless every door that closed, every almost that ended, every half-love that exposed your old patterns, every silence that forced you back into your own soul. And let this be the day you say, with your whole spirit, I am no longer available for relationships that require me to abandon myself to keep them alive. The right people will not need to be hunted. The right people will recognize your clarity. The right people will honor your presence. The right people will not punish you for having a heart that is deep, awake, and honest. And when they arrive, you will not have to become less of yourself to keep them. You will finally understand that what is meant for you does not ask you to disappear. If this message met you where you are, let it be more than something you agree with. Let it become a decision. Let it become a boundary. Let it become a new standard in your life. And if you are ready, write this over your spirit today. I do not chase what cannot choose me. I do not shrink for what cannot hold me. I do not settle for what cannot honor me. I become the truth I have been waiting to meet. Carry that with you. And from this moment on, may your life stop making room for almost. May your heart grow allergic to confusion. May your spirit recognize peace without calling it boring. And may the connections that enter your life next match the honesty you have finally given yourself.